Moving ahead with a House proposal to provide Israeli aid and no Ukrainian aid, and to pay for it by making cuts to the IRS. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says those offsets could add nearly $30 billion to the deficit. But Johnson told reporters today he does not put much credence in what the CBO says. Bill Hoagland, senior vice president of the Bipartisan Policy Center, says Johnson's plan is in direct contrast with what GOP senators want.
I think this is going to be a major test for the new speaker, and it could lead to here we go again. It could lead to a potential shutdown. But I hope that we can get over this and we can find a solution.
Bill Hoagland spoke earlier with Bloomberg Sound On. The next government shutdown deadline is November 17th. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And it is 4:40 on Wall Street. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. Big day today, and we do have this news crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Disney to pay $8.61 billion for Comcast's 33% stake in Hulu. It will acquire that 33% stake held by Comcast, NBC Universal, as I mentioned, for $8.61 billion. And of course, we'll be getting Disney's quarterly results next week. Stocks gained on the day big time after the Fed declined to raise interest rates again, holding steady. Fed Chair Jay Powell said the Fed is committed to fighting inflation, but he really kind of hedged on whether the Fed was going to raise rates more in this cycle. And here's one of my favorite comments from Powell. Check this out.
We haven't made any decisions about future meetings. We have not made a determination, and we're not, I will say that we're not confident this time that we've reached such a stance. We're not confident that we haven't. We're not confident that we have. And that is the way we're going to be going into these future meetings.
Yeah, so a lot of hedging there from Fed Chair Jay Powell today, along with that decision not to raise interest rates again, at least for now. The Dow closing about 0.7% higher, up 222 points. The S&P 500 up more than 1%, 44 points. The NASDAQ up 1.6%, up 210 points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.74%. Spot gold down on the day by about 0.3%, 1978 an ounce. Crude oil down about 0.1% there, 90.81 a barrel. Qualcomm shares surging in the after-hours session after reporting its quarterly results. DoorDash shares also gaining as much as 10% after posting the largest total customer orders ever and raising its outlook for the year. This underscores, of course, the strength of its food, grocery, and retail delivery business. Airbnb shares, they've been under pressure in the after-hours, seeing fourth quarter revenue that is lower than analyst estimates. And that, guys, is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right. Thank you so much. Denise Pellegrini in there for Charlie Pellet with a lot of earnings after the close. Even though we're over the bulk of it in terms of earnings season, there's still a lot more coming out. And then, of course, we have Apple tomorrow, which is certainly a big, big one. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit off of earnings, talk about The Skim. It's a nonpartisan digital media company catering to women. It's a subscription newsletter company. It offers things like the Daily Skim, Skim Money. There's also a podcast and a lot more in terms of what they do. The privately held company, their investors include GV, which was formerly Google Ventures, also Disney. We just heard Denise talk about Disney when it comes to the Hulu ownership. Homebrew Ventures is another investor in the company. We talked with both of the founders back in March, and great to have back with us this time around the Skim co-founder, Danielle Weisberg. She's on Zoom in New York City. Danielle, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Before we get into some specifics, I always like to talk perspective. You guys have been around for more than a decade. It's been a few months, about 6 months or so since we last talked. Talk to us about, how business is doing this year, and just talk to us about how you see the environment right now.
Yeah. So, listen, you guys are in this day in and day out in terms of public companies. And I think that when it comes to this environment, we know ad spending has been really up and down. It's been tenuous. I think that when those budgets flex, the biggest thing that you can rely on is a direct relationship with a sought after customer. And at the Skim, we have been representing millions of women for over a decade. Our audience is the people that you want to reach and that you need to reach. They are the ones that are making 95% of household purchasing and spending decisions. So while the overall media landscape continues to have challenges, we've certainly felt that. But at the Skim, what we come back to again and again is what you can't duplicate and what you can't just start overnight, which is a real direct relationship with a group of women who look for us every single day.
How big is that group? Just remind us in terms of your subscription base. Mm-hmm.
Over 12 million women.
Wow. That's a lot.
That is a lot. Are you guys, just remind me too, only subscription based, or no, there's ad dollars that comes in?
No, we have a differentiated revenue model. So we have sponsorship, we have subscription, and actually our fastest growing line of revenue has been commerce.
Danielle, at the SCIM, you have a very interesting initiative going on called Show Us Your Child Care. Talk to us a little bit about what that is, what the goal of that is.
Yeah, so it's a good day to talk about it because there was, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a report today where we were finally able to look at data in comparison to childcare costs in 2019. So the price of childcare is up 32%. That means that many families can't afford to both work. And that price surge outpaced overall inflation. I mean, when you look back at this year, how much time have we spent reporting on inflation and thinking about what that is doing to families and the decisions that they're having to make? And think about then what it means to say childcare costs are going beyond that. And again, this isn't new. This childcare crisis has been in existence for years, and the pandemic only made that worse. And in fact, the only time that there has been an investment the U.S. has ever made, a sizable investment in childcare, was during the pandemic. And when that pandemic era funding expired, which it did, there were no other solutions offered. So it's leaving about 3.2 million children and their families without childcare options. And that is absolutely just unacceptable. We have an economy that more and more relies on parents, both of them, to work. And to do that, you need to make sure that your kids have proper care.
Right. Listen, you're preaching to the choir. Nobody's going to, yeah, we totally agree. We talk so much here, I feel like, about the lack of affordable daycare or childcare, if you will, for many, many millions of Americans. Other countries seem to have figured it out. You guys have a partnership, and talk to us a little bit about it with Moms First. You're partnering also with companies such as Etsy, Verizon, MasterCard, Chobani on this. Tell us what specifically you are doing to kind of impact this problem or this situation.
Yeah, so we launched hashtag Show Us Your Childcare, and this is the second real civic action campaign that we've launched. The first was hashtag Show Us Your Leave, and what we believe is really matching areas where there is a disconnect for what the government is doing. So again, childcare has not been something that's been solved by Democrats in leadership or Republicans, and so because of that, we again have really needed the private sector to step up, and I think that this is a time when there's not one right way to know how to support your business through a childcare cliff.
But how best do you think the private sector can do it? I think many would argue, yeah, maybe the government doesn't need to be involved, that there are private sectors that have definitely been very profitable, and that as a benefit or to help out their workers to make it easier, or in a tight labor force, bring more workers in to actually provide childcare. So what are the one or two things that can really make a difference here?
Well, the first is use it to attract and retain talent. So this is a big way to make your policies transparent. Use our hashtag Show Us Your Childcare. And that's where we've gotten over 80 companies such as Pinterest, Chobani, WW, Etsy, Verizon to make their policies transparent. And what that does is it really virtue signals that you care about families and that you are going to put, your money where your mouth is.
But what do those companies actually do? That's what I'm curious about. What do they do that actually helps people with their childcare needs?
Yeah, so it's everything from flexible work hours to cash stipends to put towards childcare costs. One of the things that we do at the SCIM is team up with a partner, VV, to make sure that there's backup care options. So we offer kind of a bank of credits on those days when you have normal childcare, but you need a plan B. Your childcare provider is closed or someone's sick. So it really runs the gamut to on-site childcare centers. And again, it's going to depend on the size of your business, how much you're able to invest, but there are different things out there. And we want to make sure that that's part of the conversation when it comes to benefits.
And I imagine there's a pretty good economic incentive for some companies to get more engaged with childcare. Is that a selling point of this initiative?
And Danielle, just got about 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think overall as a society, we should all make sure that we have a growing workforce, that we have nice things like Social Security. And to do that, we need to make sure that women stay in the workforce. So I think overall there's a benefit there. Right. But there's also invest in employees, they'll stay longer.
All right, we got to run. Thank you so much. A very timely issue, something we've been talking about at Bloomberg. The Skim co-founder Danielle Weisberg on Zoom in New York City. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
And from Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Denise Pellegrini. We're getting word Walt Disney is offering to buy Comcast's one-third stake in the Hulu streaming service for $8.61 billion. The final price apparently will be settled through an appraisal process. Both companies are saying a deal could be completed sometime next year. Sources say WeWork is preparing to file for bankruptcy as soon as next week. They say the co-working company plans to seek Chapter 11 protection over in New Jersey. And Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle says it's just not clear yet exactly what's happening over there.
Now, the company missed interest payments back on October 2nd. That kicks off a 30-day grace period. Missing the payment would be considered a default. WeWork declined to comment on what the company called speculation, and yet went on to say that there's a forbearance agreement in those bonds that allows them to have positive conversations to try to work it out.
We'll see what happens there. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle reporting. Airbnb out with a disappointing outlook for the fourth quarter. It is citing greater volatility in the economic environment than it expects will maybe hurt demand for travel. Also, Qualcomm shares they're higher on an upbeat revenue forecast for the year. And many in the retail world consider the start of November to also be the start of the holiday shopping season. This year could include two Black Fridays. Walmart unveiling details about its promotion plans for the month. They include Black Friday sales event in the stores November 10th. In addition to the actual Black Friday on the 24th, day after Thanksgiving, both events will be preceded by online sales 2 days prior. So I guess that means
That's
Black
crazy.
Wednesdays. And that are your company stories we're following for you.
Let's get a check on the late.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Mike. The first U.S. citizens are leaving Gaza, and more are expected to follow in the coming days. The State Department's Matthew Miller says there are about 400 Americans and their families who've asked for help.
We are going to give them specific instructions over the next few days about where to go, when to go, how they can get out.
Miller says this development comes following days of negotiations. Vice President Kamala Harris is in London attending a conference on artificial intelligence. She told those gathered today it's important to lay the groundwork for the future of AI and says the U.S. is creating the AI Safety Institute.
30 countries have joined our commitment to the responsible use of military AI, and I call on more nations to join.
Mayor Harris says AI could have the power to fight the climate crisis and help with scientific breakthroughs. President Biden is visiting a Minnesota farm today and announced more than $5 billion in rural infrastructure investment. It's a part of a 2-week tour of sparsely populated areas by members of his administration. With Thanksgiving just 3 weeks away, some new details are coming in about what your turkey dinner might cost. Dr. Michael Swanson is the chief agriculture economist with the Wells Fargo Agri-Food Institute.
There's some good news in that the turkey prices are falling. That's the main thing that we celebrate. Down about 13%. We put more birds in the barn. Other things are more expensive. Food inflation is still up about 2.5% from a year ago in September. So we expect some of the other things that you're putting on the table to be a little bit more expensive.
Swanson tells ABC one item that's seen a spike in cost is canned cranberries. They're up a whopping 60%. Legendary entertainer Cher will be part of the 97th Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade this year. She'll be performing a new holiday hit. 7 new balloons will make their debut, including the Pillsbury Doughboy and the Beagle Scout Snoopy. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now back to you, Mike and Carol.
Cher and a new Snoopy balloon? That's pretty cool. Just going to say, that parade's always great. All right, you are listening, of course, to Bloomberg Business Week. Nancy, thank you so much. We bring you news throughout the day here on Bloomberg Radio. But now you can get the latest news on demand whenever you want it. Subscribe to Bloomberg News now to get the latest headlines at the click of a button. Get informed on your schedule, on your own schedule. You can listen and subscribe to Bloomberg News now on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, plus Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And if you go there now, you're probably going to find this story because it came out after the closing bell. Disney saying it'll acquire the 33% stake in Hulu held by Comcast, NBC Universal for $8.61 billion. Remember when this was created, Hulu, there were like all these different competing networks that owned a piece of it. And now that everybody's got their own streaming services, like everybody's kind of moving around or backed off of some of it.
Yeah, final price will be settled through an appraisal process and is likely to involve several investment banks. The people familiar said they expect the deal to be completed next year, but you do have to wonder, Carol, how this shakes up the whole streaming wars. I'm looking at the stock prices of both Comcast and Disney. Not a lot of action yet, but I think this is a potential shakeup to the entire